This is a Worldly Experiences. We're going to talk to Mark Barash today, who's been in Pittsburgh for a long time as a broadcaster and a broadcast executive, and has a great past in radio and TV, and is going to give us some of that background as well as what's going on in media today and how to get into that field. So, Mark, tell us a little bit about your beginnings. How did you get into the media field?
Well, that goes way, way back. It starts out with a desire to be in media, and then I transfer that into a actual job and make a living on the media wings. So that's where it started, and it was, geez, I want to say 60 years ago, in that ballpark, that this all began. And I found out early on in life that for some reason I had a desire to have my face and or my voice in media. And I started doing that, believe it or not. I started trying to get myself on TV or on radio when I was 8 and 9 and 10 years old. I remember when I first made my first foray into media, when I was wanting to talk to politicians, and they were on the talk shows at night on WNBC and WABC. They always carried the politicians arguing and so forth. And I went down into the basement where we had our only second phone, and I would make calls and try to get on the air. I would simply say, I have a question for Governor Rockefeller. Can I please talk to him? And they'd say, stand by, you're next. And here I am, I'm thinking, wow, I'm 10 years old and I'm next to talk to Governor Rockefeller. And so I get on the line and I'm so nervous. Hello, this is Governor Rockefeller. Can I help you? And I start to tell him my story on whatever it is I wanted to ask about, taxes or bus transportation or whatever. I'd make something up so that I could be on radio or be on TV. And that's kind of how the first foray into it happened for me. And I built from there.
Oh, really great, stories, enterprising youth. Getting into the media business. Later, you were in management. Did you see that in young people when you were in management? You were the person hiring people. Did you ever find people coming to you with a lot of energy and creativity, and who you would find that way too?
There were those, and then there were those.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that in the opportunities that I was able to grant when I was at WPXI TV, some of them were taken with open arms and tight clutches and wanting to carry on what I could do to help them. And then there were others that had no reason to be there. They don't know why they were there. They have no idea what they're going to do with their life. And so I tried to get to the bottom of what their interests really were. And could they make a career in broadcasting, or were they just not the type? You gotta be a certain type, Jeff, for broadcasting. It's a crazy business, a real crazy business, but you know, I just came to love it. And I was able to share with people that passion. And I think that's really what the difference was, that I was able to share a passion for broadcasting and for television radio that was rare. I don't know, again, I don't know how I got it, where I got it, but I got it. And oh yeah, I did. My sister was in theater, so that started things off as well. So yes, those opportunities were given. And again, sometimes they were grabbed and sometimes they were tossed aside.
Yeah. And so it's a real different landscape though today for someone trying to get into the business. Plus, there's entirely different businesses now about radio and television too. What do you think are the biggest changes that you've seen happen in radio and TV in all these years?
One of the things that comes to mind first is equipment. You can do today with a $99 computer what you couldn't do 20 or 30 years ago with a $10,000 computer. And because of that, I think opportunities for young people, for people that have been in one end of the media and want to go to another, I think those are available. But really, it is the media. You can come home and again, do work in the field with a small camera and a computer laptop and edit stories. Go out and shoot news and edit stories. And you know, television stations are looking for people who can operate a camera and operate a laptop. It's so cheap nowadays to buy a story. You could send Joe Schmo out to do a story and Joe will come back in 2 hours and he'll charge you I charge you $500, but really it's worth about 99, what's happened. And,
Yeah.
and that's the way television stations are managing. They're managing their costs now by hiring people with not a lot of experience, with the basic equipment that you need, and then a smart, a desire, a talent, you know, all those innate things that we need as broadcasters.
Yeah.
So that's how I'd say that's how it's changed mostly.
Radio and broadcast radio in the car, AM, FM, still there, even with everything else that people have available. What was it? What's was it like? What was your first radio job like?
First radio job was in a small town called Mineola, New York. And I got the job kind of backhandedly. I decided that, again, I wanted to do something about this urge to be on radio and be on TV. And my father, seeing this in me, said, why don't you write letters and see if you can get a job? And I said, Dad, I'm 15 years old. Nobody's going to hire a 15-year-old guy to be on the radio. Well, why don't you try? Why don't you get a letter out and try? Dad, they're not going to do it. Does it hurt to try? We had this argument back and forth, back and forth. And finally, he won. I said, all right, I'm going to try. I got out my little typewriter, no electric typewriters in those days. They were all manual. Got out the typewriter and started typing away to 15 different radio stations in New York. And they were all Long Island / New York stations. And I got 14 rejection letters pretty quickly. The 15th one, however, said, we've got interest in what you've asked about. Why don't you give us a call? So I gave a call to the radio station and they said, what do you have in mind? I said, well, I'd like to get a radio show where I can do commentary on sports and I can share that with all of Long Island and maybe make some money too on the side. And they said, well, we heard you, your tape and you sounded really good. And we think this is something that maybe you can turn into a career at some point. Why don't you start out here at our radio station, 1520 AM on your dial, and see if you can get something going. And the trick is, though, that you have to sell advertising in order to have the time to do it. And so I said, I don't care what I got to do, I'm going to do it. So I went ahead and hit the streets with my little briefcase and my little suit. And I'm now trying to sell advertising when I couldn't have sold anything a year prior to that. I had no idea how to sell. I went on the streets and started selling advertising. I remember the names of some of the companies that I sold to. One was Nowadays Driving School. Another was a jewelry store locally and so forth. And the jewelry store really kind of made me realize that, hey, this is a cool business, because I'm walking down the street and I walk into a store that says going out of business. It's a jewelry store and they're going out of business. And I said, well, I think they want money on my side, but let me go try. So I walked in with my briefcase and I said, hey, I'm going to make your day-to-day. I have a great deal. I can get you radio time on WTHE in Mineola if you can pay a nominal fee. And they said, well, we're really not interested in paying a nominal fee. What we'd like to do is trade you radio advertising time for the gems in our jewelry counter. And I said, whatever, okay. So he goes to the jewelry counter and he opens his drawer and he pulls out a bag. And the bag is one of those velvet bags, you know, they're all fancy. He opens it up and he goes like this, and all of the gems are going all over the glass counter. And I'm saying to myself, wow. He said, pick something out. Pick something out, anything you want. So I picked out a watch for $250. And back then, that was probably like a $500 watch. But I picked out a watch for that much money. And I said, I will take this. And he said, fine, you have a deal. I took it back to the manager of the radio station. I said, I got myself a watch. And there's no fees or anything like that. And we just have to give him a couple of spots on the radio. And the general manager said, fine, deal, go ahead. Thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow. And so that's kind of cool. I got myself a nice $250 watch. And I walked about 3 blocks to a business going out of business. So there were lots of opportunities for people who knew how to sell. I didn't, but I learned. And I think that that would be something that I'm going to recommend now to everybody watching that wants to be in broadcasting and wants to make a living, is recognize that there is money to be made in radio, television still, and the opportunities to get yourself to sell radio and television advertising are there. I always believe somebody who is interested in business needs a background in sales, and particularly in radio broadcasting and TV broadcasting and cable. Can't
Yeah.
forget our friend at cable, even though many companies are beginning to forget our friends in cable and they are cutting the cord. Kids are, usually millennials and so forth. They are cutting the cord. But so that's how it kind of happened. I got into the sales part of it as well as the broadcast part. And there we go. We're off and running.
It's amazing. Now you mentioned it just a tiny second there. You mentioned it, and I didn't hear it before, but you sent a tape. You actually made a demo tape
Yes.
with a
Yes.
cassette tape recorder.
Cassette tape recorder, demo tape. Of course,
Multiple
if we were
copies.
going to
You had
do,
make
we were
multiple.
going to use, we'd use digital of some sort today. We'd get a flash drive or something like that if we were going to send it in.
You
But
made
yes, it was
15.
a tape. What's that?
You made 15 different demo tapes.
Exactly. The same thing 15 times. And it would take about 4 hours. And
Yeah.
so you're done with that and you send it in and they are able to watch it or see it on a cassette tape recorder. And
Sure.
that's how people got stuff from me and I got stuff from people on cassette.
Uh-huh. That's pretty amazing. And I mean, did you have a voice quality that you thought was great for radio? Did they think your sound was fantastic? I mean, or it's just really the ability to speak without hemming and hawing and without pausing. You sounded good, put together, that kind of thing.
And Jeff, I think it's a little bit of both things.
Yeah.
And if you're to ask me today about what needs to be from when it was back then, I would say you needed to have a good voice. You needed, if you were going to be on television, to have a good look, and you needed to be the cookie cutter style of anchor/reporter.
Yeah.
And if you had those things, you were off to a good start back then. However, now, I don't think you need a good voice. I don't think you need to look all that pretty. And it just seems to me that you're able now to get in more in the broadcast side of it than you used to be if you didn't have all of those wonderful traits that you do need now that maybe you didn't need back then or vice versa.
Well, there's also more channels of all kinds today with all the different cable channels and national, international, and people do their own YouTube channels. If they can't get someone to hire them, they hire themselves and
Exactly.
create it for themselves. So it is really different. So you were really involved in it. I don't know when the golden age of broadcasting was. People sort of say the 50s were, but the 70s, 80s, and 90s is just incredible expansion and change and significance of these things in society. Did you see really gigantic shifts while you were there in terms of the importance of news and media and the attention placed on local news and also the criticism of local news in that period of time? Did you see all of those things happening right in front of you?
Well, in the later times when I graduated from high school early, I started to look at what opportunities were going to be available to me. And I saw some right away, but the reason I saw those was because you're right, things were changing in the way we were receiving and the way that we wanted our news and wanted our information. And by the way, if folks watching don't know, news is the number one important advertising on a television station. News advertising on TV stations and radio stations are huge. And if you want to make lots and lots of money, try to sell news on a radio station or a television station because they have opportunity. The news is the number one most important thing. And it was back there. But nowadays, we do a whole different newscast. It's different in so many ways. I could talk for an hour on how it's different. But we did have the opportunity while at the WPXI to have a news broadcast that was faster and it was technically more interesting. It had reporters who, again, in some ways, having the right look was important and is important today. I wouldn't say it's the most important, but it is important today. So all of those elements did go into the idea that how are we going to do news today? And of course, the equipment got news to us faster. We could do news live. And I cannot believe now I can do news live, a whole newscast on this laptop.
Hmm.
I could do it right now, right here, and be as competitive as most small market television stations would be with their news.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing
Yeah.
that you can do your news right here and it be a pretty neat product?
Yeah. And with all the changes and speed and technology, you wish you could say, oh, people are more well informed than ever before, but we probably can't say that.
Now, I could probably cite some places like you can where the news is a little different than what you might think.
Yeah. And with all those choices, it's really up to the people to do it. But let's get back to a young person looking into looking into some of these fields, and maybe having the same impulse as you. I want to be out there. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. What do you think are the biggest skill sets that they should work on? Is writing as important as it would seem to be for these kinds of things?
Writing is the most important thing, without a doubt. It's the most important thing you can do or need to do. You need to know how to write. And I'll tell you what, my wife's a college professor, and I taught a little bit here and there, and certainly dealt with young people. Writing skills generally are terrible. And I hate to say that because I've been preaching for years that you need to learn how to write. And I just don't think everybody gets it and everybody wants to put in the effort. But you cannot walk in 2 steps into a radio station if you don't know how to write. And if you do know how to write and you prove it to them pretty quickly, you've got a good way of getting to that, getting into the ballpark first before you watch a game.
What kind of things are going to be writing that they need skills for writing copy for ads, writing memos, writing reports? I mean, I'm not sure what kind of, when does it come up?
All of the above. And the thing
Yeah.
that I think is perhaps most important, if a television station can use the internet to get their message across through either a shortened newscast or a longer newscast or whatever you want to do, if you can get that across with good writing skills and good creativity and good camera work, again, you're on your way to a newscast. Now, it's not going to be the same newscast that ABC or NBC produce, but it's going to be something that has information for people and has video for people and has communication with people. And those are so important to doing a newscast, vital.
Yeah. And so there's so many different things that go on in TV stations. I mean, besides news, they're doing some local shows, some other local programming as well. And the weather is part of the news, and sports, of course, has a huge importance as part of that, as part of the news show. In all those things that are going on, I mean, is it a hectic, crazy environment all the time? Is it is somebody has to be used to a lot of stress? Is it a stressful type of place to be?
It is stressful. And that's why after 36 years, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go through something else now. It's not quite as stressful, but it really is. It's a stressful business and they pay you well. And the reason they pay you well is because you have a certain skill that can manage the stress that may happen in your life when you join a television organization or a radio organization.
So managing stress is part of the day, would be managing stress. And sometimes most people don't know much about the government interaction with television and radio, but we know that broadcasting has regulation about language. But what are the regulation? Is there other significant regulations still with radio and TV, or is most of it gone?
Well, it's kind of shifted, I think. The radio used to be very tightly held as far as what you could say and what you couldn't say. And they were the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, was very much holding on to that. You can't say this, you can't say that. And if you do, we'll fine the heck out of you. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a guy I'm sure you've heard of named Howard Stern. Mm-hmm. And the FCC made it a hobby to find Howard Stern because he would come on and just say anything. You wouldn't believe the things that came out of his mouth while he was on FM radio. And that's an important distinction here we're going to make here first. He was on FM radio for all of his broadcast years until a company called Sirius came around, Sirius XM. And Sirius XM was a satellite channel. It was not a broadcast channel. And the difference is one goes up and gets hit with a satellite and comes back down again. And the other, you got a little antenna outside your brick building, and you're running 1,000 watts, or you're running 5,000 watts of broadcast. And that was the terrestrial broadcast. So the satellite broadcast comes in, and Howard Stern comes to town, and Howard Stern starts doing a program that literally is filthy, but has an audience, believe it or not. And it has a huge audience. And anything Howard did started to become a discipler's learning, because he knew that what people want and were not getting was X-rated jokes, comments that were not for general purpose, and also material that should be restrained and in certain parts of the day. And so Howard did a pretty good job of trying to hide all of that with himself on the Sirius XM radio. And he is huge now. I mean, it is amazing. The ratings that he's getting on satellite radio, it's just amazing. So he had a gamble. He gambled that satellite radio was going to work and was going to be around. So he left the terrestrial, went to the satellite, did his shows every morning, as filthy as he could find it, as filthy as he could do it. And Howard Stern makes $30 million now for 3 years, something in that.
And it really was ahead of his time with paid media, with paying your radio bill. I mean, nobody would have thought you had a radio or a TV bill years ago. And now people pay a Netflix bill, a cell phone bill, a wireless bill. They have many subscriptions online. Music, a music bill too, right? I mean, music and radio, two different things. People pay for their content now, right, instead of listening to a lot of ads, right? I mean, that's the trade-off, is the ads. So no more selling ads for a lot of those stations, right? They just make the content and sell directly.
Some organizations pay for advertising on Sirius XM satellite. In fact, Howard sells, not him, but his company sells advertising on his show to general folks that would like to be specifically involved with advertising specifically on Howard's show.
Yeah. I didn't know they even had advertising. It's amazing. And I just started listening to some Sirius. I didn't have it for years. And I'm amazed at the variety of channels. The number of channels is just amazing. And that you can listen to it your whole ride, your whole trip. If it was across Pennsylvania, we used to lose our radio stations, of course. But now you listen to the same station across the country. It's real different. But do we lose something if people don't listen to local radio? And local radio, is that doing well? I mean, how is the local radio station doing?
Everybody says when the next great thing happens, it's going to mean the death of the things that caused it. So in other words, they used to say when television came around, it was going to be the death of movie theaters. So, was it? No, it was not. So then when radio comes along, it's going to be the death of Sirius XM and their plans for radio and their plans for satellite. Did that happen? No, it did not. So no matter what came, it always survived the company or business that wanted to take a shot at it. And that's why we still have radio today going strong. We still have television going strong in about 8 different forms. It is still going strong. And none of the entries to try to beat them all has ever happened.
Yeah, but if a young person said they wanted to get into be on local radio, is there really a great career path in a local radio station? Are there that many jobs in local radio?
Well, I think it depends, again, what part of local radio you're going to do. If you're talking about selling advertising, I think there's such opportunity, such wonderful opportunity available to people that have an inkling of how to sell or want to be taught how to sell. So that is definitely around. Newscasts, local newscasts are still being done, not on every radio station, but on the bigger ones like KDKA. They do a local newscast every hour, every half hour, and they make sure they do it because it does localize and keep them close to an audience. Whereas before, other stations, they've broken their tie with audiences and they no longer have the big budget radio and that we're sending reporter Joe Schmo out to cover the fire at the airport and
Yeah.
he'll be reporting back soon. All of those things, some of them went away and some of them got increased.
Hmm. And the local radio stations are still doing talk shows, call-in shows. Are there still local call-in shows?
Oh yeah, and KDK has them different hours of the day.
Yeah.
And there was a station with all news in Pittsburgh. It no longer is, so that may tell you, give
Yeah, they
you a
stopped.
sort of the weather of what's going on in local broadcasting. But the KQV
Yeah,
actually went out of business
yeah.
uh, while they were trying to do news all the time. It couldn't make it work. They couldn't sell it.
I
Couldn't
was
make people
surprised.
buy extra for it.
I was surprised because I thought I used it when I really just wanted some news, what's going on. You want the weather immediately. They always had the weather or the traffic every 10 seconds it seemed.
Right.
But the family that owned it just decided to stop doing it. It wasn't profitable enough,
Right.
and nobody wanted to buy it.
Yeah, and I looked at it, and that's what I did. I looked at it and walked away.
Yeah, nobody wanted to buy it. An AM news station would be difficult to sell today because just a young audience is not turning on the radio that much.
Yeah, right. The younger audience is not listening to AM radio, period. They
Yeah,
don't know what AM radio is, nor do they have an interest in finding out. The only time they understand what AM radio is if there's a sports team that has its rights to broadcast on AM radio and
yeah.
FM radio, they can do that and they're getting that sense. But as far as other content, no.
Let's talk about sports a little bit. That really was something you hung your hat on for a long time. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with sports and media.
Yeah, sure. When I started my radio career, that was first. It happened because again, I wrote that letter that radio station got and understood what I was trying to do and gave me the opportunity, gave me the chance. So at 15, I am now doing a radio commentary show on a weekly basis, and they are paying me a small amount of money, but still, they could have paid me nothing, and I would have been there an hour early. By the way, I would have been there. So the radio part of my career kind of let me do commentary, and that was about the extent of it. I couldn't really get into more than that unless I found a way to do it. But voila, I found a way to do it. I went ahead and started to cover a professional soccer team in New York called the New York Cosmos. And the name might be familiar because the greatest soccer player that ever lived played on this team here in New York, in Long Island, actually, at Hofstra University's field, Pele.
Yeah.
And I had the honor of having the opportunity to do the broadcasting for the New York Cosmos team, complete with the greatest player that ever lived, Pele.
Wow.
So there is one incentive to kind of, for me to take the next step in broadcasting and to do that. And the management of the Cosmos, name of the team, heard me do play-by-play just into my microphone, into a tape recorder. And they said, hey, would you be interested in doing our announcing? And I was like, yes, 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 where do I go? And so I was offered this position. And this was the gateway to not only getting great seats for every sporting event that I could want to go to. Every single sporting event, you get the seats down front and you get the pizza at halftime and you get to meet the ball players and you get to meet the soccer players after the game. And it was like heaven. It was like heaven. But the thing that that also interested me in hanging around was the ability to interview athletes. And as long as I could interview athletes and do stories, both audio, radio, and television, and in the form of newspaper, then I would be a happy guy. And that's what happened. They allowed me to do the play-by-play. They allowed me to do the covering the team and writing the stories about them. And I was just amazed. And that one of the things that you get to learn when you meet celebrities is that you could get a little nervous. And here I was beginning to learn how to write, and I'm getting a little nervous about having to go and interview folks. And one particular time, it reminded me, well, here's three different occasions. Number one, the first guy that I ever interviewed, first one, I'm 15 years old. It's at Yankee Stadium. So I'm going to Yankee Stadium. I take the bus, which takes 2 hours from Long Island to get to Yankee Stadium. I get to Yankee Stadium, and I had called in advance to the public relations guy to say, hey, I'm coming, and I'd very much like to do an interview. And they said, okay, when you get here, we'll see what you got. So I get there and arrive, and he says, okay, who do you want to talk to? And I look in the dugout, and there's a guy named Sparky Lyle.
Yeah.
And I said, I'd like to talk to Sparky. He was the best relief pitcher in baseball at the time. And they said, well, let me see. And the PR guy goes over to Sparky, and then he comes back. He says, all right, he'll talk to you. So I walk over to Sparky. I introduce myself. Again, I'm 15 here. I walk over to Sparky. I introduce myself. And I say, I'm Mark Barash from WTHE. I'd like to see if we can do an interview. Would that be okay? And he says, sure, kid, go ahead. You know, they're like, sure, kid, go ahead. So I said, all right, Sparky, there's a lot of controversy this year about having relief pitchers on the all-star teams. They've always been starters, and now you're putting you're not putting relief pitchers where they should be in the all-star game. And Sparky, I said, how do you feel about that? And Sparky looked at me and he said, oh, F the all-star game. And now I've got a whole dugout of about 15 New York Yankees hysterically laughing at me, laughing at my expense, that Sparky said F the All-Star game to me. So that was one of the occasions where, again, a little bit nervous, but it worked out because he made me laugh and so forth. The next one was a guy you might have remembered by the name of Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. And Muhammad Ali was appearing at a car dealership, and it was my direction to go out and do an interview with Muhammad Ali. So I go ahead and I go out, and I get there, and there's a big crowd of people, and they're all listening to the champ of the world who had just beaten George Foreman. So he's talking to folks, and finally he says, well, it's about ready to go, folks. If anybody has any questions, and I had my little tape recorder, and I stuck it up like that, and I said, champ, I have a question. He goes, well, what you want? What's up, man? And I said, a lot of people, including George Foreman, are saying that the reason you beat him was because it was so hot in Zaire he couldn't handle it. He said, and he put his fist up like this, and he said to me, it wasn't the Zaire weather, it was the Ali leather. And the people there are now hysterical. They're like laughing hysterically, and I need to get out of here really quick because I'm really embarrassed at what just happened. But I understood in later years that might be something I could use in a radio show or a TV show. Oh. And so the champ of the world went ahead and made fun at my expense. And there was even another one where, well, I'll remember that later. But
you got the tape of that?
I do. I think I do. But that was part of the fun. It was to meet athletes and to be able to interview them and get close to them. And it was just like a dream come true. I'm sitting there next to Ali. I'm sitting there next to Pele. Amazing.
It's pretty amazing. Well, again, you skipped over something pretty fast. I want to go back to it. You said you would record the calling of the games on tape and then play them live on the air, and then play them on the air.
No. Well, there was some things that we did that was tape delayed. Yes. So in other words, instead of it being on at 8 o'clock live when it happened, we would record it and play it back at 10 o'clock in the evening. So there was some of that. And the reason very simply was it wasn't that easy to get a remote live signal from wherever we were. You had to make sure that you had the right frequency and you had the right power and you had all that you needed to be able to broadcast live. Now it's so much easier because we have something called the internet, and you can broadcast live on the internet if you needed to, whereas you couldn't in the past.
Yeah. Well, we do have some folks watching right now. If they want to ask questions, they can type into the chat room, and I'll forward some of the questions to you. So do feel free to type in a question if you have for Mark Barash, talking about media and television, radio, the history. His history includes the whole history of radio and TV since really the 70s. But we were a fan of the old time radio stuff. There's a lot of people that just are fanatics about the 40s and 50s radio shows and what they call the golden age of radio and the early days of TV. Did you keep up with some of that stuff too?
I did some of them. Mostly it was, I love the comedy shows. I thought they were really funny. And
Yeah.
this was in the 50s. I thought the comedy shows were funny, and sometimes the quiz shows were of interest. So those are kind of, my attention would go in those directions.
Some of the early things I've seen of television documentaries and some of the oral histories about early television just show so much improvisation. They were doing something that's never been done before, and sometimes for a national audience, and often live because they didn't have tape for a long time, and they improvised a lot of things that we think of today as normal. That's what they do, but they were invented on the spot in a lot of cases. TV later had to become very rigid, very by the minute, by the second, every single thing they did, uh, and networks relationship with local stations became really is it the was the most important thing for a local station to be part of a network. There, what happened to the independent local stations? Did they disappear?
Well, they didn't disappear, but they didn't replace network either.
Yeah,
Network is one of the most valuable entities a station can have. WPXI's relationship with NBC, people would go crazy if that ended for whatever reason.
yeah,
That it's so important. So WPXI maintained good relationships, and that's part of my job, was to maintain good relationships with NBC, and to make sure that we treated them well and they treated us well. And yeah, they were important and still are to this day.
yeah. And some of the changes in regulation, the most important one people are talking about today because we're realizing that it made such a big difference. Was it a big concern of the fairness doctrine of the FCC?
Yeah, that was a very important movement, a very important thing that happened. The FCC ruled that you no longer had to have a dissenting or an alternate voice on a topic that was being discussed. So let's say person A is very conservative and person C is very liberal, and they're going at it, and they're going at it and going at it. The guy that was C left, and the guy that was A was still there, going at it, and talking about that guy that just left, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, he's crazy. And the station, they said some bad things about the station, and so the doctrine said that you no longer had to allow time for people to have dissenting views, and that was sort of different, and it made television stations and radio stations happy, so that they could go ahead and give their opinions without worrying that they're going to have to pay a fine
Yeah.
or something else.
I mean, it was originally put in to make sure because they recognized TV is going to be very powerful
Yeah,
in terms of forming people's opinions.
yeah.
It's going to be where they get their information, form their opinions. If it's one-sided, it's going to be limiting. So they said it's got to be balanced, and then they just got rid of it. Said it doesn't have to be balanced anymore. And do you think it's for the better or for the worse? What do you think?
I have varying views on that. I like the fact that it's First Amendment stuff, which, you know, us in broadcasting, we love First Amendment stuff in journalism. And I like the fact that there's a situation where you can say what you want and you don't have to worry about what you say. And that's Constitution 1.
Yeah.
So when you ask how I feel about it, my feelings lie in opening up the conversation so that you could have opposing point of views without any repercussions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I fall on it.
But you didn't have to. They didn't force you to put on the opposition views. Became very powerful. I mean, we
Yep.
wouldn't have some of the strong left or right or conservative liberal TV channels today. If the fairness doctrine still existed, they wouldn't be. It wouldn't. It didn't fit in with that really. So it has changed the landscape dramatically. We have a question about starting a show. College radio still exists. It's amazing that it survives, but it has a bit of it has its charm, and it's part of the music industry still. where new artists are often break into the public through college radio, willing to take more chances than commercial radio, and a great proving ground or training ground for young people. Did you see a lot of people come up from college radio?
Some. I couldn't say a lot. I saw some come up and take some training at a college radio station where I went to school at a college called New York Institute of Technology, and there were opportunities to do some broadcasting from a college radio station transmitter, and so I tried to take advantage of that whenever I could, just to kind of keep my whatever skill I had to keep it moving, and not just lay flat. So yeah, I used college radio station a little bit, and their production facilities as well, and television. They had courses, of course, and I did various production for television shows and for documentaries and things like that.
Yeah, some schools now have great facilities for both radio and TV, on campus cable TV, or sometimes they handle local access. They still have local cable access TV.
They do.
Yeah,
You can see it with Verizon if you want.
yeah,
It's basically a still which says this channel is unoccupied.
yeah,
So you kind of get used to that and not so interested after a while.
yeah. But it used to be they required the towns to have a studio and a training sessions and things like that. That's all gone, I guess.
Yeah, not all, but it's not like it used to be. I mean,
Okay.
you're right. When cable started and cable companies started getting together, there was the need for some exposure for local equipment and people also that wanted to learn a little bit more about maybe being in broadcasting. Those access channels
Yeah,
were needed.
yeah,
And back then too, it was important for an access channel to have the weather and the temperature up there and whether it was going to rain or snow tomorrow. So people did use those access channels in elementary ways. Of course, we have much different ways of presenting that information.
So we have a question for someone who does radio on college radio. What would you advice would you give them for promoting what they do? Should they start promoting themselves while they're on college radio? Would that lead to their next job?
I would say that do not count on another entity promoting what you do.
Okay.
It's not likely to happen.
Uh,
You need to, if you're really serious. Now, here's how. Again, these are the kinds of the risks were taken back when I was getting into the heyday of this stuff. If you really want to take a risk, go ahead and go to a cable channel and say, I'd like to buy $300 worth of advertising. And they'll say, for what? And you say, well, I have this new show. It's on channel 92 on Verizon's cable, and I want to advertise it. And I'm going to get a promo made, and I'd like you to give me some spots for $300. And so the guy would go ahead and say, okay, we can have a schedule. You can run this in prime. You can run this in the daytime, this in the morning, and you can promote your new show.
Yeah.
So we'd love to have you. We'd love to work with you. It's money coming into us, so that's good. And yes, that does happen, but not a lot. And again, I go back to people aren't taking the kinds of chances that they used to, despite the fact that the whole thing is laid out for you. It's
Yeah.
all there. Whether you're talking radio, whether you're talking television, cable, it is all there waiting for you to go ahead and utilize to do what you want to do. And in the past, you had to be in the business for 35 years, and then you had to go and make sure you could be on television. Now, again, the equipment allows you to go out of your door tonight and start to set up a radio station,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's cool. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, when I started seeing people from the original hosts from MTV showing up on ABC News,
Yeah,
go, wow, that's a new path for getting to ABC News. It used to be journalism school. Now it's MTV can get you to ABC News, and now it's probably YouTube or even TikTok or other channels that get yourself noticed, and you're going to get to the next level by somebody seeing that you're popular, that people like what you do, and you're willing to work hard to do it. That's certainly
that's right.
number one. Is it's all hard work. There's no gifts given in this industry.
You're right.
Yeah.
And it's a very unforgiving industry too. I mean, if you mess up, you could quickly be out of a job. And I will give you an example. I still have the job, but there was a incident that happened back in about 1970, it involved me getting my second radio job, and the station wanted me to practice. So they said, we're going to put you on the overnight shift for a couple of weeks. We'll see how you do. Well, they did that, and the program director was happy with what I did. And he said, guess what? We're putting you on weekend afternoons now. And we thought you did a great job. And that's why we're doing that. And I said, great. I'd love to do weekend afternoons. It's a step up from overnight. And said, fine, I'll do it. So the first weekend that I did was a Saturday afternoon, and I was running the station, and I was the only one running the station. I'm doing the broadcasts, I'm running the commercials, and what happens is I'm starting to fall behind. Now, if you ever saw the I Love Lucy incident where they're in a chocolate factory and the chocolate is going by and Lucy and Ethel can only eat it so fast, and they're trying to eat it all because they don't want it to go on the floor because they'll get fired. So that was happening. Lucy and Ethel are doing that with the chocolate. Okay, put that aside for a minute. I'm running commercial carts. These are cartridges with commercial audio on. So I'm running them after records. Hey, 18 minutes after 7 o'clock here at WGLI, and let's listen to the Turtles. And I punch that and punch it up, and we got the Turtles playing. Okay, great job, the Turtles. It's right now 15 minutes after 11, and the temperature outside is going to be 70 degrees today. Chance of rain later on this afternoon, but it looks okay for right now. We have here the Tokens, and you'd play the music from the Tokens. So this goes on, and I start falling behind. And the carts are now coming like on a conveyor belt, and they're calling off into the floor, calling up into the floor. I can't find the next record that needs to be played. I'm looking everywhere. And there is a young lady who is the newscaster who's in the station with me. And I'm really falling. I'm dying here. I am dying. The music is everywhere, and I don't know where it is. And it's dead air. Dead air means you got nothing. Okay, you're hearing nothing. So there's dead air going on, and I can't fix it. And I see the woman who does the news come across. I say, hey, can you help me? I'm falling apart here. She says, I have to do the news. Oh, I could have killed her. It was that kind of thing that was your ticket out if you did that enough. Yeah. So apparently I was okay. They were okay that I was beginning to understand what a radio broadcast for music was all about. And she just wouldn't help me. And I just fell apart. And that was that. I didn't get fired.
And the hectic quality of being there and staying calm.
Yes.
Under
yes,
that.
I could have thrown those carts through the window. It was trying.
Yeah, I've heard some dead air on the radio, and it does make you go like, "What's going on there?" So do they know that there's nothing on the radio right now? And it takes them a while to figure out. I think sometimes somebody hit the wrong button and something like that. You moved into managing too, from being, I guess they call you talent back then, and you moved into management. Did you have to go back to school for some of that? I mean, did you know accounting and managing people and hiring and firing? How did you get those? Were those skills you acquired along the way, or did you have to learn it?
I had absolutely no experience going into management, none, except whatever radio business 101 I took in college. That was about it. So you're right. I had no formal training going in, but I believed, and I always believed, that somehow, some way, I had a knack. I had a knack for doing this. And I reached back and I said, okay, where did that come from? And I know that in one way, that came from my father, because he was always fond of coming down the stairs, watching me lay on the couch, watching a sporting event. And he'd say to me, I hope you can find a job watching TV someday. And I did. In fact, I watch a lot of TV. And so, he would shake his head and walk away. And Dad, I did find a job watching TV. So that was part of what I had to do. I had to watch shows and decide which ones were good and which ones were bad. And I had a knack for that. Again, there's no way you can always know, but you could feel it, and you can watch people around you, and you can have a great sensitivity for what you're doing, and have your fingers on the pulse of it, and talk to other people. And all of those things I put together and helped me do what I ended up doing in broadcasting.
And managing people and hiring and firing and budgets and things like that. I mean, did those
Yeah,
get complicated after a while? I guess they did.
they did. And I would learn a lot by keeping my mouth shut. I
Yeah.
mean, literally, I'd go into meetings with people that wanted to sell us shows, and they'd start their presentation, and they talk about terms like barter, which I didn't know what it was, and they talk about other terms, and all of these terms are being bandied about in these meetings, and I'm sitting there just, and I take notes, take notes. I said, I can always learn this after they're gone. I'm not going to tell them now I don't know.
Mhm.
And so I would let them go through their conversations and, okay, see you. We'll let you know what we think. Bye. And the salesman would go through the door. And that's the last we heard from him. Unless I said, you know what, I really did like that show. I think it's got a chance.
Uh-huh.
And we call him back and say, hey, come back. We want to negotiate for a deal here.
So these would be syndicated shows that would be in the spaces that the network would give you during the day.
Right. During the day, during the
What were
evening.
some of
Right.
those great shows that you made a great decision on?
One of my favorite decisions, and one that I'm very proud of, because I was the first in the United States to buy the show, and that was the Ellen DeGeneres show.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was just when she just started, you was looking for a syndicated.
right. This was I don't know, 7, 8 years ago.
Uh-huh.
We were looking for a morning show, and Ellen at 11 o'clock fit the bill, and she's been #1 ever since,
Wow.
doing really, really well. So there's other shows that I had examples of, but that was probably the most success I had with one single prediction on a television show.
Uh-huh. That's amazing. And so she would just start that show, hoping to get stations to cover it. There could have been nobody.
Well, the idea was so good that Warner
Yeah.
Brothers were the producers of the show. They were the people
Okay.
backing the show. So they put the money in, they made the deal with Ellen, they did all the business parts, and then it went on the air.
Okay. There are these levels of companies in the TV business that we don't know anything about, right? Most people never are exposed to that idea that somebody's a distributor, somebody's a producer, and syndicator, and all those things. It's not something we notice. We just want it to be on when we turn the TV on.
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of times, Jeff, a lot of times the show wasn't on when they wanted. I give you an example. When at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the president was going to speak to the country over this issue or that issue, there would be the soap operas that were getting kicked off.
Yeah.
And people would come and call and scream and yell because we took the soap opera off. Instead, we have this president here who's talking to us, and they get really mad.
Yeah, yeah.
Use language that we were not all that familiar with.
And of course, you're still in the business on some of the most important historical events of all time. 9/11 being one of them, memorable day for you on TV.
It was, but actually, at that time, I was working at WJAC in Johnstown. It's a station that my station just bought, and they asked me to go there and to run it until a decision was going to be made on who would run it permanently.
Wow.
So I said, all right. So I got a hotel room in Johnstown, and I'd stay 3-4 nights a week, and I'd come home for the other 3. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm running the Johnstown station, and all of a sudden, I'm at my office in Johnstown, and the secretary comes in and she says, do you want me to keep with this, or should we run our syndicated programming? And I said, keep with what? She said, a plane just ran into a building. I said, what? A plane just ran into the building. I got up out of my chair, and there's 3 monitors there, and I'm watching all 3, and it's the same thing, and this is no joke.
Yeah.
And so I said, yes, we keep this on forever. By all means, do not take this off. So those are decisions that you have to make as a general manager, as a program director, and I made that decision on that day, which wasn't a hard decision. You of course you leave that on, but throughout the day we have to talk about, now do we preempt this show? Should we preempt this show? Should we preempt this show? And of course, again, the decision was we preempt everything. We do not do anything except network news right now.
Yeah.
Send people to the crew, send people to the site. And when they arrived, they opened the live shot from the site, and they turn on the transmitter, And we're now seeing the smoke come from the ground, billowing from the ground on 9/11
Yeah.
after the plane went down.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And we were the closest. WJAC was the closest TV station in the world to that happening on that day.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it was an amazing, amazing day. I will never forget it for the part that I had to manage, that people in Johnstown and the surrounding area got their news and kept news on in some ways for them. All those decisions, you know, you have to make them. And I think we did a pretty good job.
Great. Well, great, Mark. Great information, great stories, and advice, and ways to think about media and getting into the business today for young people. Certainly, lots of opportunities that you see there for them, and great material. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being on Worldly Experiences. Really appreciate your taking the time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And maybe we'll also do this again sometime with the continuation, part 2.
Okay. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it, and love what you're doing. You're really filling a service here, fulfilling a service, and I think when word gets around, it's going to be real positive.
All right, I hope so. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, Mark. See ya.
Bye-bye.